Now to set it up. First things first, the material that I use. I'm using this rig as a single. I'm not attaching any bag to this rig, so I want it to be as anti-tangle as possible. And I'm using 20-pound IQ2. And all I'm doing is I'm using my tackle box on a diagonal to measure the finished rig. So all I'm doing is chopping it about 3 inches longer than a diagonal length of the tackle box, just to allow for tying the knots. Now the swivel that I'm using is a PTFE coated spinner swivel. One of the things that I like with my fishing is I like the most amount of movement on my rig, and obviously with the PTFE spinner swivel, it's just giving me that extra little bit of movement on the hook end. So as the fish is sort of sucking and blowing, it just makes that hook go into that fish's mouth that much easier. One thing that I do that probably not a lot of people do is I attach this via a figure-of-8 loop. A lot of people crimp it, but I like to tie a loop again to add even more movement to that hook end. And then all I'm doing to finish off the boom is just threading down an anti-tangle sleeve and finishing it at the top with another figure-of-8 loop to clip on my quick change swivel. Then it's down to the hook end. Now, a pattern of hook that I've grown to love is the crank. Here at Horseshoe, it's barbless hooks only. Now, a lot of people sort of have the myth that with a barbless hook, the minute you take any pressure off the line, that the hook is just going to pop out. That is simply not the case. But what I like to do to ensure I've got maximum security when using a barbless hook is I always like to use a hook with a beaked point. Just gives me that extra little bit of security, and here at Horseshoe, it is proved just that. So I'm using a size 4 barbless crank, and then all I'm doing is I'm cutting the sort of top kicker part off of a large kicker, threading it round on the hook and attaching it to the spinner swivel before adding my micro ring swivel and a high grip hook bead. Now, the reason why I like to use a high grip hook bead is sometimes if it doesn't go according to plan and you've got to make a couple of casts, when you're casting out, I don't want that hook bait to move. You know, how I'm setting that bead, which is directly opposite where the barb would be, is exactly where I want it to stay. And I know that if I keep doing repetitive casting, that bead is going to stay nice and secure, meaning that when I finally get it out on the spot, the hook bait is going to be presented exactly how I want it to be. Which then leads me on to the hook bait that I'm using. Now, here at Horseshoe, I'm using a 12mm pink pop-up with 5 maggots over the top. Now, I know 5 maggots might sound a little bit specific, but I know for the hook bait that I'm using over all of the years of fishing with naturals that 5 maggots allows that pop-up to sort of sink very, very slowly under the weight of the components and be perfectly presented for hours on end. Now, one thing that is also worth mentioning as well when you are using naturals is you always run the risk of the smaller fish coming in and maybe taking those off. Now, by using the maggots, it just gives me that security that I know